Hello everybody and welcome to the first video in our series of videos on the French Revolution. As always, we begin with our learning outcomes, so by the end of this presentation you guys should know the factors that led to the French Revolution, you guys should know some of the French Enlightenment thinkers, and finally you guys should know the three states and a fact about each. So the French Revolution was probably the single most important political revolution to have ever taken place. It changed the world forever, and it can be seen as the pivot point into the modern era of history, particularly in the West. So today we are going to focus on the reasons behind the French Revolution. There were many causes, but we will try to narrow it down a bit. The first thing that we're going to look at is events kind of across the Atlantic in America. France's woes really began with the loss of its American territories, which we see here. They lost them during an event known as the 7 Years' War, which took place between 1756 and 1763. France had allied with Austria, which had been its most bitter rival for a very long time, and the partnership didn't really work out too well. Austria lost lands, Prussia in Europe, and France lost its colonies, which are highlighted there above. And they amassed a huge debt in America. After this, in 1776, of course, the US War of Independence broke out, and this had a big impact on France. First of all, not wanting to miss an opportunity to stick it to the British, another one of their great enemies, the French joined America in their war, despite the protests from the Controller General, which was basically the finance minister, that they were broke and it was madness to enter this war. But it still went ahead and did it. And after the war, there was after the war was over, their hopes of getting good trade deals or a good influence with the resource rich Americans. It did not happen, and France really gained no advantage from it. On top of that, in America, they saw the implementation of political ideas that had their origin in Europe. There was a philosophical movement known as the Enlightenment, and the Enlightenment thinkers believed that reason and human intelligence could be used to improve the world around them, whether that be with justice, education, or how people should be ruled. And some of the great thinkers like Voltaire and Rousseau came from France, and Montesquieu, whose spirit of the laws was a massive influence on the Americans, also came from France. Along with these new ideas, the idea of what it was to be a good ruler began to change. The Americans got rid of the monarch altogether. King George was kicked out and they went for democracy, while in Russia and Prussia, which would be equate to pretty much modern day Germany, they were ruled by these people known as enlightened despots, like Catherine the Great in Russia and Frederick the Great in Prussia. These despots, they believed in ruling using the ideas espoused by the Enlightenment thinkers, as opposed to an absolute monarchy that existed in France under King Louis the 16th. In the picture we can see here, this is actually King Louis XIV, who really would have been the stereotypical absolute monarch. He would have ruled about 100 years before Louis the 16th. But they believed heavily in the divine right of kings to rule as they wished. Um, these Enlightenment ideas also ran in contradiction to the way French society was structured. French society at the time was known as the Ancien Regime, or the old system. There was no parliament, and Louis XVI could pass any laws he wanted. As part of the alliance with Austria, Louis was married to an Austrian princess called Marie Antoinette, who was hated by the French. They really did not like her. On top of that, the population in France was divided into three sections, or estates as they were known. The first estate was the clergy, and that numbered around 1,000 people. The clergy, they didn't pay taxes and they owned about 10% of the land in France. Then we had the second estate, which was the nobility or the aristocracy, who owned well over half of the land in the country, and they refused to pay taxes as well. They numbered about 400,000 people, while the third estate was everybody else. This went from lawyers to teachers, all the way to peasants. And there was around 25 million people who were in the third estate, and these had to pay all the taxes. They had to pay a land tax called a talny. They had to pay a tithe, which was 10% of their earnings or crops, to the church. They had to pay the hated cabal tax, which was a tax on salt. Salt was necessary for preserving food. So with this broken system and massive debts, it was only a matter of time before the money ran out. And despite some pretty imaginative banking by a finance minister called Jacques Necker, the bill finally came due in 1787. The new Minister of Finance, Charles de Calonne, tried to raise taxes by summoning an assembly of notables. When the first and second estates refused to pay the taxes asked them, Louis was then forced to call something called an Estates General. For the first time in 175 years, this thing was called, and we will look at the Estates General in our next video. So that brings us to the end of our presentation. So by now you guys know the 7 factors that led to the French Revolution. You guys should know some of the French Enlightenment thinkers. And finally, you guys should know the 3 states and a fact about each. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys got something good from this video.